Hello everybody, my name is Shortline614 and welcome back to episode 11 of Shortline's Rail News and Comment, and this is part 2 of the CPKC STB hearing recap. I'd recommend you go watch part 1 first, and let's get right into this deep dive, shall we? So our first segment is about CPKC support among shippers and opposition from various shippers and online communities. So, a decent amount of shippers along both the CP and KCS networks support the merger, and among one of these is Hapag-Lloyd, which is one of Canadian Pacific's largest customers. They are very supportive of the merger, saying that it will offer their customers new routing and service opportunities. They commented that CPKC's plan to bolster the Mexican port of Lorenzo Cardenas as an alternative to the congested ports of Long Beach and Los Angeles will open up new services that would strengthen the supply chain. Hapag-Lloyd has also stated that they have begun to work with CP and KCS on movements between Lorenzo Cardenas and various Midwestern points, including Houston, Dallas, Kansas City, and Toronto. And American ports, however, in the Pacific Northwest and California oppose the merger since they say that traffic would be unfairly diverted to Canadian and Mexican ports since they are cheaper to operate. Canadian ports actually receive a subsidy. The fact that Canadian and Mexican ports are cheaper to operate is one of the major driving factors, I think, behind this merger and various mergers in the past, including that we've seen over the past few years, including CP, and CSX Pan Am with the Point of St. John. And the fact that a lot of these ports, a majority of the traffic flowing through them is not bound for Canada or Mexico. In fact, it's bound for the United States. Prince Rupert, British Columbia on CN is a perfect example. Most of that traffic is going through there is not bound for Canada, it's bound for the US, and CP hopes to do the same thing with Lorenzo Cardenas. Meanwhile, three shipper organizations, the National Transportation League, the Fertilizer Institute, and the American Chemistry Council, are not outright opposed to the merger, but are concerned that CPKC closing gateways with other railroads, CP's policy on hazard material shipments, and capacity issues could result in a slowdown of service that could negatively affect them. That's where a lot of shippers stand. What about various states and communities online? Well, many states and communities that the new CPKC would run through oppose the merger due to increased train traffic, which they would say would have a negative effect on public safety and the environment. They also said that the STB's environmental draft report is wrong because it said the merger would not have any big effects other than increased noise. That draft environmental report was reviewed and released back in the middle of last year. The opposition has especially been strong around the Chicagoland area. In fact, several Chicagoland politicians want the decision on the CPKC merger, which is expected within a few weeks to a month or two, delayed until a full study can be conducted on service in the region. The study would be completely separate from the environmental draft report, where the STB ruled that the merger would have minimal negative effects. Illinois Senator Dick Durbin and Illinois Representative Raja Kirishtumatheri, I apologize for mispronouncing that, and the Coalition to Stop CPKC said in a press conference that they don't believe the board has the proper information to rule on the merger, and that this proposed study would rectify that. They also said that they don't think the merger is undoable. Just by building proper rail facilities west of Chicago would solve the problems. Now, Coalition to Stop CPKC, now this was a group that had previously asked for the merger to be outright denied, due to increased train traffic negatively affecting their communities outside of the Chicago area. If the merger is approved, they currently ask for $400 million in conditions, a number that was rounded down from the $5 to $8 billion that they initially requested. Gee, I wonder why they thought they could get that. However, it's not all bad for CPKC on the state and local front. The state of Louisiana supports the merger because it will bring jobs to that state. In addition, the Southern Rail Commission says it supports the merger in the region since it has come to an agreement with CP and KCS for the expansion of passenger service in the region. CP and KCS have also come to an agreement with Amtrak for improved passenger services in the upper Midwest. So, let's go on to the next segment. So, our next segment is concerning CSX and their requests along the Meridian Speedway. So the Meridian Speedway, if you don't know, is a Kansas City Southern, Norfolk Southern joint venture between Meridian, Mississippi and Shreveport, Louisiana. NS owns 30%, while KCS owns 70%. NS primarily uses the speedway to reduce travel time for intermodal shipments between it and the Western railroads. Now, as a part of the speedway agreement, NS has the exclusive right to interchange intermodal traffic with KCS and Meridian. This blocks CSX from being able to interchange intermodal traffic with KCS. CSX does reach KCS at Meridian over trackage rights over G&W subsidiary Meridian and Bigby from Montgomery. CSX wants this intermodal exclusivity agreement repealed so that it can better compete with NS for intermodal traffic between the Southeast and Southwest. CSX intermodal traffic now has to take a roundabout route, either Memphis or New Orleans, to reach the Southwest, and it has no direct competitive way to serve the Dallas-Fort Worth market. CSX says that NS and KCS have blocked other railroads out of competition over the Speedway, and that the CPKC merger would only make it worse. Now, CSX did say it tried to come to a similar agreement with KCS and BNSF to the Meridian Speedway in 2006, but was unable to come to an agreement before NS did. And CSX legal counsel John Cunningham argued that the Speedway deal was in fact illegal, since the agreement only allows NS to interchange intermodal traffic with KCS and Meridian, and this did not receive full review and was simply exempted. Now, STB Chairman Oberman was very skeptical of CSX's request to lift the interchange exclusivity agreement, seeing it as reactive. He said that it found it very hard to believe that CSX would simply allow the issue to sit for 16 years, reiterating what he said earlier concerning CN's attempted acquisition of the Gateway Western, that CSX is simply using the fact that there's a merger application in front of the board to get something out of it, and basically something that they couldn't get in the free marketplace. Board member Patrick Fuchs additionally added that CSX had cited the agreement it now opposes back in 2016 when it applied and received approval for a joint infrastructure project with the Louisville and Indiana Railroad. Under the terms of that deal, CSX has exclusive rights over the L&I between Indianapolis and Louisville. In addition, CSX said it was simply unaware of the agreement until recently. Fuchs responded by saying, quote, "I'm addressing the contention that CSX was in the dark for all these years and didn't look at it when it seems though you've been actively citing the exemption. You're drawing from the contacts to inform your own joint use agreements," unquote. Norfolk Southern's response? Well, Michael McClellan, Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer, told the STB that CSX is making, quote, "absurd claims," unquote, about the agreement, saying it either ignores or fails to understand the agreement or simply cherry picks parts of it to make its own points. McClellan also said that competition with CSX is very much alive, citing how BNSF shifted most of its southeast-southwest intermodal traffic from NS, KCS, to CSX in 2007. Now, do I think that CSX requests would improve competition? Yes, however, I don't think it's likely to be improved. And this comes back to the philosophy of the STB in regards of many of these requests, and something that I've actually learned about the STB in researching these videos, which is I initially thought that the STB board would be very receptive to requests like this proposed by CN, CSX, etc. However, despite all the rhetoric about increased competition outside of the hearings themselves, they've actually been very critical. And to kind of figure out what Chairman Oberman specifically is thinking, I still think he wants competition, but instead of taking a proactive role in expanding competition through granting other railroads concessions and merger applications, he would rather have the railroads sorted out in the free marketplace rather than through the regulators. His philosophy is very much in line with precedent. The STB, since the Staggers Act, has had this, or the ICC before that, has had this philosophy to protect competition but not competitors. If a merger of two railroads results in a direct loss of competition, then the STB will step in and order divestiture, such as in the case of UPSP being the most recent example. However, if a railroad does not result in loss of competition, a merger, but divestiture of one of the merged railroad's lines would increase competition, the STB might be receptive, but they'd still take a very critical look. We see this in CN's attempts to require the Gateway Western / Springfield line, and in the Meridian Interchange Agreement. So, our next segment is also on the Meridian Speedway. Our third segment is also concerning the Meridian Speedway, but specifically concerning CP, UP, and the EMP Intermodal Program. So, what is the EMP Intermodal Program? Well, the EMP Intermodal Program is simply a pool of intermodal containers that shippers can use to make sure that they have better service and smoother service along the Meridian Speedway. And Norfolk Southern is concerned that intermodal service along the Dallas-Atlanta corridor, which the EMP program operates, will suffer as a result of the CPKC merger. Meridian Speedway carries about 10% of NS's total intermodal traffic, so they have a right to be concerned. NS is specifically concerned that the CPKC intermodal traffic growth at KCS's Wheelie, Texas intermodal facility in the Dallas-Fort Worth area will result in NS-bound traffic being constricted. NS also fears that increased train count and operational changes between Wheelie, Texas and Shreveport, Louisiana will result in slower overall service. NS currently has haulage rights over that line from Shreveport. CP is also not a part of the EMP intermodal program, which is joint between UP, KCS, and NS. The fact that CP is not a part of this program poses a threat to NS intermodal traffic along the Speedway, as CP cannot simply take KCS's place within the program. UP has the right to determine which railroads partake in the program and says it would not allow CP. Quote, that creates a real problem for us, because a significant amount of our business moving between Dallas and Atlanta moves in the EMP program. KCS has access to the EMP program, CP doesn't, and at this point we don't have a replacement program and a significant number of customers that are using it, says McClellan, unquote. UP says it would not allow CP to take KCS's place in the program, stating that the possibility of merger between CP and KCS has changed the nature of railroad competition, and that the EMP intermodal program no longer makes any sense. Although UP says it would reconsider ditching the EMP program if the STB rejects the CPKC merger. STB Chairman Oberman responded by saying, quote, well, my reaction is that it was punitive, a retaliation for the merger. I can't interpret it any other way. All things considered, quite frankly, it doesn't put UP in a particularly good light when we're considering protecting UP competition, unquote. Now, in the event that CPK service deteriorates, NS is requesting that its haulage rights between Wheelie and Shreveport be converted to outright trackage rights, with the right to use CPKC's Wheelie Intermodal Terminal. Agreements like this do have precedent, even in the private market, which would please Chairman Oberman. In 1982, the Susquehanna signed a haulage rights agreement for Conrail between Little Ferry, New Jersey and Binghamton, New York for intermodal service. In the event that Conrail service deteriorated, the Susquehanna's haulage rights would be converted to trackage rights, and well, that's exactly what happened. So there is a precedent for this, for NS's request. Now, STB board member Fuchs questioned why NS is seeking these protections now, when it had been saying for years that intermodal traffic needs no regulation. NS responded and said that the protections that they proposed would prevent intermodal traffic from shifting to the highway in the event that service deteriorates. And, of course, we have to talk about Union Pacific. They are a complete, utter mess right now, and that would probably be a whole separate video. Bill Stevens made a good article on that. I might link it below. But UP's threat to withdraw from the EMP program and hurt intermodal service along the Speedway, I frankly agree with Oberman. I don't see any other way that this isn't retaliation for the CPKC merger. UP does not want the competition, and frankly, they get to decide who's within the program, and they have market power and a robust route structure, and they can effectively retain most of that traffic while hurting NS and CPKC. So I do think that NS is concerned that UP would effectively sabotage the Dallas-Atlanta intermodal route as a valid one. And I also think it would simply be another long list of reasons why Union Pacific is utterly incompetent right now. But as I said, that might be a future video. Our final segment for today is Canadian Pacific's various rebuttals to a lot of the issues that have been brought up. So, the main concerns have come from BNSF, Union Pacific, and Canadian National, and they have voiced concerns that the CPKC merger would result in widespread service problems, like occurred during previous Class 1 mergers, including the UPSP merger, the Conrail split. However, those mergers are very complicated. The UPSP merger involved merging a weak and fragile SP into UP network that it closely paralleled. UP was also very arrogant when it acquired SP, thinking it could simply ignore SP's operational experience and advice, which ended up resulting in the biggest meltdown in recent railroad history. UP also merged the two computer systems of the railroads on day one, hoping it would smooth over immediate operational changes, which would result in savings on merger cost. UP clearly did not learn from history, since Penn Central tried the same thing with similarly disastrous results. Merging two computer systems on day one is a very hard thing to do, and maybe even nigh impossible with big mergers. The Conrail split was arguably the single most complicated rail merger ever attempted, since it involved splitting a railroad on a scale that had simply never been done before. Every merger-related change kind of had to be done on day one, and chaos resulted. If CPKC was a much more complicated network, then yes, I would see other Class 1s having a point. However, CP and KCS only connect to Kansas City. Operational changes involving the running trains over both CP and KCS trackage would be fairly easy to implement, and as a result, the two railroads can simply just take their time merging their computer systems. Operational changes, at least initially, are going to be very limited. CP lawyer Dave Meyer said in the hearings, quote, "There's nothing like that for us to plan for. We start with two railroads that connect at one point, and on day 2, they're going to connect at that same point, and it's not going to be an interchange. It's going to be the same trains, the same traffic, the same operations, and there just isn't any special calamity for us to prepare to be remedied." CP also has experience involving mergers through their previous acquisitions of the Central Maine and Quebec 2 years ago, the Dakota, Minnesota, and Eastern / Iowa, Chicago, and Eastern system. CP CEO Keith Creel was also involved in CN's acquisitions of various American regional railroads throughout the 2000s, so he brings that experience. Now, rail mergers, of course, are very complicated, and there will almost certainly be issues, and no merger goes without issues. But I simply don't see how this will result in widespread chaos like previous Class 1 mergers. Now, here's something that I need to add on. So back in episode 10, I talked about Houston and how UP and BNSF were concerned about CPKC's plan to send an additional 8 to 12 trains a day through Houston. They fear that would cause gridlock to Houston's rail network. CP responded to these concerns by saying that 8 to 12 more trains is within the day-to-day variation of current train count, and trains can be operated more efficiently through Houston to free up capacity. CP backed up its claims by showing a video of a CPKCS run-through train through Houston, taking 75 minutes to run through the spot UP and BNSF claimed would be affected. CP CEO Keith Creel used the video to show how operations could be improved. A train was routed into the siding that was too short to hold it, and a train also passed a UP train that was too long for the lead into Englewood Yard, blocking the main in the process. Creel stated that this was, quote, "the last thing a railroad concerned about terminal throughput would do. You can't get your ambitions ahead of your physical plant. You have to match yard capacity with mainline capacity, the size of trains," unquote. He additionally stated that if UP wants to run longer trains through Englewood, they should extend the lead tracks in and out of Englewood Yard and the sidings in the region. He also said that CPKC would be willing to help with capacity projects should they become necessary. Now, one thing that I suggested back in episode 10 is that there is no good way to send all the new CPKC trains through Houston. It would be a good idea to reroute some of them around it. Chairman Oberman had basically the same idea, except I didn't know it at the time, saying that it could route a few trains that don't do work along the Gulf Coast between Texarkana and Laredo via Austin and San Antonio. Up to 4 current and 8 future CPKC trains could be routed along this route. CP and KCS said they wouldn't confirm if they have talked to UP about the possibility, but the board responded positively to the suggestion, saying the railroad should take a look at it. And I frankly agree too. So, on to the conclusion. So, in conclusion, you've heard my thoughts, you've heard my opinions. What's my final conclusion? Well, I simply don't see any reason why this would be denied, considering the STB has been very responsive to the merger. If it doesn't get approved, I think that this would be a massive failing on behalf of the STB, due to the merger being basically entirely end-to-end and hopefully increasing competition. And now, what do I think will happen? There will certainly be some conditions tacked onto the merger. I don't think that this is just going to be rubber stamped. Most of which will be to various online communities. CP and KCS have already signed agreements with many online communities for environmental mitigation projects. They've also signed agreements with Amtrak and regional passenger rail groups for the expansion of passenger rail, which I expect to be added on. As for the conditions that CP and KCS haven't agreed to or are willing to agree but haven't come to any formal agreement, I think you will see concessions on the Chicagoland side to Metro, and possibly some to the coalition to stop CPKC, which will be very ironic considering their name, although not too many. CN could get trackage rights along the Springfield line / Gateway Western. The board was pretty responsive to that, and the board also seemed to be responsive to the proposal for Houston bypass if UP and CPKC can strike a deal. I think that the new CPKC will see a fair amount of success. I think one of its major successes will come from nearshoring, which is the practice of, due to COVID, basically, taking manufacturing from Asia and bringing it over to North America, specifically Mexico. I think if that trend continues, CPKC will be the #1 spot in order to take advantage of that. And I hope everything will go smooth, and maybe by the time this video is out, the merger will be approved. So, I don't know if this is probably going to be my last video on CPKC for a while. Hopefully not, I don't know. And yeah, I'm excited to see what happens. I think that 2023 is going to be a pretty interesting year for railroads, as the last few years have been. And I'll continue to make these deep dive videos. So, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.